Well, we're back today. I'm Keith Queen with Experience Cuban Culture, and today I'm joined by our founder. You want to introduce yourself, Colin?
Hey Keith, good to be here. I'm Colin Ganley, and we're going to talk today about the De Viajeros form, means the traveler form. It's the new way that Cuba wants everyone who travels to Cuba to fill out their customs and immigration form. So it's nice that it's all electronic and you don't have to fill out that little piece of paper on the airplane and borrow a pen and make sure that it's not too bumpy in the turbulence or whatever. Now you can just do it online before you leave. But the thing is, you do have to remember to do it before you leave. So that's why I wanted to make a video. How are you doing today, Keith?
Well, I'm doing good, but you've got me a little nervous. What happens if I don't do this before I leave?
Well, I did that one time when they were first implementing this new procedure. I didn't realize it, and I didn't fill out the form before I got there. So when I landed, they had some paper forms for me to fill out, but they're trying to phase that out. And so now, when you check in at the airport, they'll ask you if you have the barcode that comes at the very end of completing this form, or actually it's a QR code, I think. And so they make you show that to them at the airport before you board the plane. So if you don't, then you can fill it out on your phone if you need to, right there in the airport, and just have an electronic version of it, which is also fine. But the best way to do this, in my opinion, and how I always do it, is I do it at home and I print out the little QR code that they give you at the end so that you can show that it's done, and then everything's nice and easy.
Beautiful. Okay, because you're like me. When I travel, I often travel with my family and my kids, and it's already tough enough when we think about packing, bringing all the right stuff, keeping everything on time. Flights are always delayed these days. Anything I can do to expedite my travel, make it more efficient, and just take headaches off my plate is definitely priority number one. So I think this is awesome. Yeah, I'd be interested to know how what obstacles people run into. What's the first step? How does it work?
Okay, so the very first and probably most important thing, unless you're bilingual, is to go to the website, and it's probably going to pop up in Spanish at first. So, slide number one here, it has it in Spanish, which is how it comes up for me. But if you look at the top right hand side of the page, the web page, you'll see what looks like a Chinese character, a double arrow, and the letter A. And what that is it's how you change the language of the form. So click on that, and it should give you a little menu where you can select English. And then the whole web page should turn to English and make this a lot easier for you.
All right, I'm already grateful for you because if I was looking at this screen, that just looks like hieroglyphics. There's no Q. I would never would have clicked that. So you're already adding a lot of value.
That's one of the most, that's honestly, that's probably the most important thing because most people can figure out the rest of it. We'll walk people through because there are a couple questions that even some really seasoned travelers would have when they go through this, particularly because it's Cuba. So I think it's important to go through this, but yeah, I mean, this is probably the number one thing that people need to know.
Okay. All right, so we've converted it now to English. We flipped it over. And what are we going to find out next?
Okay, so the next slide, slide two, just shows the same page translated into English. So now the whole thing's in English. So there's really nothing more that we need to do here, except that there are two buttons. So one says form request and one says edit form. And because we're starting a new form, we're going to hit form request. Part of the reason I wanted to do this walkthrough is because when it shows up in English, it's not the best English. It's obviously not natively written in English. And so things like form request are kind of awkward. But that is, in fact, the button to push. And so that's the little red button. And that brings us to the first page, which says personal data. Now, this is probably the easiest stuff. So what's important to understand is that you don't need to fill in every single one, but the fields that have an asterisk, you do have to fill in. So first name and first surname would be your name. So in my case, Colin Ganley. Now I have a middle name and I could put that in there, but it's unnecessary. So oftentimes I just skip it. I just put my first name and my last name because that way I know it's going to match my passport perfectly. Nothing's in the wrong place and they'll get it. So first name and first surname for last name. Birth date, make sure you notice that it's day, month, year, not month, day, year. And then gender. For gender, you need to choose whatever is on your passport. If there's something that doesn't line up there between the options that they have and what's on your passport, then you're okay. Just choose whatever you think makes the most sense. And if you have to explain it when you get there, you can do that. They're going to ask you what country you were born in. And the way that the United States is written is United States. It's not in Spanish. It's not a funny way to do it. You're going to have to fill that in several times during the course of the form. Then issuing country just means what kind of passport do you have? Is it an American passport? Is it a Canadian passport? And then country of permanent residence is probably going to be United States once again. Email, phone, and other phone are not required fields.
Do you advise putting in that other contact information? Is that you think helpful or beneficial, or just keep it basic to what they're requiring?
Um, I do put some stuff in there just as kind of a just in case. If they need to contact you, you want them to be able to contact you. And so I do put in an emergency contact. You can see on slide 4, I filled in the form with some dummy information. These are not real people or real phone numbers or real email addresses. So don't look for this Diana Reed person that I made up. You can see that I did put in an email and a telephone number for this fake person. And I think it's a good policy, but it is not required if you don't want to. So once you have filled in all that personal information, you click Next at the bottom, and it's going to bring you to a page called Migratory Information. Now, for this one, you're going to need to have your flight information. So primarily it is, well, I'll tell you exactly what it is. So it's what date are you arriving? What is the flight number? The airline name. You don't need to fill in your seat number. And then when it asks you for the airport or the port of entry, you're going to be most likely flying into what they call A.I. Jose Marti. The name of the airport is Jose Marti. I think it stands for Aeropuerto Internacional Jose Marti, International Airport Jose Marti, La Habana, HAV. And HAV is the airport code that you're going to probably see on your ticket, as long as you're flying into Havana. Now, here's where it gets a little bit interesting. So you are flying to Cuba, and if you're doing that, you should be doing it legally. And if you are doing it legally, that means that you're traveling for one of the reasons that the Treasury Department says that you're allowed to travel there. But the thing you need to remember is that Cuba doesn't care about that. From Cuba's perspective, and this is a Cuban form for Cuban customs and immigration. From Cuba's perspective, they want to know if you're traveling there as a journalist or if you're on business or if it's tourism or whatever the reason is. And unless you're traveling as a journalist or for some very specific business, you're going to want to indicate tourism. The visa that you're going to get is going to be a tourist visa, even though your reason for travel may be support of the Cuban people or it may be education. That's an American distinction. From the Cuban side, if you're traveling for either of those reasons or most reasons, you're traveling as a tourist from the Cuban perspective. So you would select tourism. Is that clear?
Yeah, it makes it very easy because it feels like most people traveling, especially with us, it really limits the need to really think about that drop down and just kind of keep it very focused on tourism.
Yeah. It's from Cuba's perspective, you're a tourist, even though in a real sense, you're kind of a tourist because you are traveling to see Cuba. But from the US perspective, you're not. But almost always, tourism is the selection here. And then leave the institution blank. It's not required, and there isn't an institution that Cuba recognizes that you would be with.
Okay, just for a point of clarity, because I might not be the only one with this question, but it does appear there's an asterisk, but I see it grayed out. So, but you're telling me that you can get by pushing next without filling that out.
Yeah, I was able to. I don't know why, but it did allow me to go without filling anything in there.
Okay, just in case anyone else was unclear like I was.
If it doesn't allow you to pass there, I would just put a period, and then it will see that there's text there, and then you can move forward. It's not a drop down, so you don't have to select anything. It would be asking you to type something in. So I would, if it won't let you pass the page, I would just put in a period.
All right, so we hit that, and we're probably going to move on to a new page. What's coming next?
The next page is called sanitary information, so that's slide 7, and it's going to ask you some information about health. This is basically their health page. And in the post-COVID era, there are questions about that. So they start out without that. They start out by asking you where you're staying. Um, and I have put in here that it is a hotel, and it's the Hotel Nacional. You will find that that is probably the easiest thing to do is put in a hotel. If you put in something else like a Casa Particular or something like that, you're going to have to know the very specific address for it. And so it's easiest to just put in the Hotel Nacional. It helps if you're staying there, but they'll accept basically anything that you put there. So be accurate, but if you can't, this is a good default. Countries visited in the last 15 days. So anywhere that you've been in the last 15 days, they would like to know. And that's just because if there's a breakout of a disease in a place, then they have a red list of countries saying, oh, well, if this person's been to Guyana and there's an outbreak of such and such, then we need to maybe screen them or ask them more questions or whatever. So that's going to be the effect of whatever it is that you write in this field. So you can see that for this person, I put the United States, and I did not select any symptoms. When you drop down the symptoms drop down, it only gives you positive symptoms. It doesn't say no symptoms. It's not one of the options. So if you've had no symptoms of anything, you just leave it on select. Same thing on questionnaire. You just leave it on select. There's no need to do it. In the case of this fictional person, we have a choice between whether they've received a COVID vaccination or a test, PCR RT test. So you can travel to Cuba either as a person who's received a vaccine or as a person who's taken the test within a certain time frame before the flight. So in this case, because so many people have gotten a vaccination and it's the easiest way to get into the country, I selected vaccination. And then you'll see a drop-down menu so where you can see the list of different vaccines that they have listed in the drop-down menu. So if you can find on there the vaccine that you have had, or that you want to say that you have had, you'll find most of them here. So the ones that were commonly offered in the United States would be COVID-19 Janssen. That's the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. There's the Pfizer vaccine, which is also a very common one that people received. And then you can see down at the very bottom, there's one that says AstraZeneca. That was also another one that a lot of people had in the United States and around the world. Then there's some kind of funny ones in here, Sputnik and Sputnik Light. Those were Russian vaccine. There's some funny ones. Sinovac, that was a Chinese one. But anyway, you need to select one of these vaccines in order to fill out that section of the form. And then it asks you if you had a full schedule of the vaccine or if you did not complete the course. So that's going to be up to you how you fill that out. Johnson & Johnson was a single shot, so I put one, or that person would have theoretically had one shot and they would be fully vaccinated. So I selected full. How does that sound, Keith?
I think the only question I have hearing that is, in order to move forward on the next, are those check boxes between either the test or the vaccination required to have one of those two for entry into Cuba?
Yes, you do need to choose one of the two. Right now, Cuba requires that you either have a vaccination or a test. However, when you land, they don't ask for any proof of these things. So I believe that you're certifying by signing this form that everything that you say is true, and that then they just accept your statement as enough evidence to go to Cuba. All right. So the next page that you go to is customs information. And on this page, they're essentially asking you all the things about what are you bringing to Cuba. Um, I learned this in the research for this video that we're doing, but I didn't realize what unaccompanied baggage is. Do you know what unaccompanied baggage is, Keith?
I feel like I've seen it, and but I don't think I've ever looked at what the actual definition is.
So I've been traveling for 30 years or something like that internationally, and I've never actually knew what that was. And I think I've even gotten different answers, but I looked it up, and unaccompanied baggage doesn't mean the bags underneath the airplane. It's anything that isn't checked in or with you in your hand. So any hand baggage or checked luggage, or even if your baggage was checked with you, but then it gets delivered later, that's not unaccompanied. That's with you. Okay. So unaccompanied baggage would be a really strange situation. Like if you somehow were able to send luggage on a different flight or something like that, not with you, then you would say yes. But almost 100% of people would say no, they have no unaccompanied baggage. I didn't know that. I don't know. I feel like people have misconceptions about that, but it's on all these customs forms, but almost nobody, actually has unaccompanied baggage. Um, how many kids are traveling with you under the age of 10? That should be self-explanatory. Currency. Okay, so this is an interesting one because people do have to bring cash to Cuba. So if you have less than $5,000 USD, US dollars, or the equivalency in any other currency, then you have to declare it. If you have more, you have to declare it. If you have less than $5,000, you don't have to declare it. So it says the import of Cuban currency is free. Declare the total amount if it is greater than $5,000. So if it is greater, you must declare it. Okay. If you have less, you do not have to declare it. You can feel free to do so, but there is no need to do it if it's under 5,000. There are consequences for not declaring currency that you bring in worth more than $5,000. You have certified that what you say on this form is true, and so you would be essentially lying to the government of Cuba if you do not declare it. So definitely, if you have more than $5,000 or its equivalent, you have to declare it. And if you do declare it, they'll probably just ask you what it's for. Then you explain that you have a penchant for buying lots of Cuban art or cigars or whatever the thing is. And then they'll say, oh, okay. That is the experience. So besides your personal belongings, are you bringing anything with you in your luggage? Items you have brought in your luggage, they're looking to find out if you want to declare any cultural assets, live animals, pornography, commercial items, so things to sell, or satellite communications equipment. So this is kind of an interesting one. So there are things you're not allowed to bring into Cuba. So the drop-down menu for this is states what some of those things are. So you might want to think twice if you are bringing for no good reason any of these items. You're not allowed to take inner cultural assets is really like, did you take something from the museum and are you taking it out of the country? That's not really applicable. Number one, don't do it. But number two, this is for entry into Cuba. And so that's not really that relevant. Drugs are not allowed to be brought into Cuba. It says drugs, narcotic drugs, psychotropic substances. If you have a medication that falls under this category and you need to have it with you, then you should check this box and bring your prescription to show that you actually do need to have that. Live animals, you should not be bringing those for any particular reason. In most cases, pornography is prohibited to be brought into Cuba. Um, these other items, satellite communications equipment, and walkie-talkies, they're sensitive about bringing in communications devices. So don't bring unnecessarily any walkie-talkies or any other devices like that. If you have a Yeah, you're not allowed to bring in drones. And if your phone is, if you have a satellite phone, like this is getting to be a little bit of a gray area with Starlink and things like that. But for the moment, not so much. But for the most part, right now, people know they either have a satellite phone, and almost nobody has those, or they don't. So if you don't know, you're fine. Anyone who has a satellite phone knows that they have a satellite phone, and they should not bring it with them. Or if they do, they should declare it on this form. So I would avoid bringing that if you can. And because they will typically, I've heard people bringing in things like that, or walkie talkies, and what happens typically, although not in all cases, is that they take it from you at the airport and you can pick it up on your way back out. So don't bring that. Don't bring drones. Don't bring drugs. Don't bring nudie magazines or whatever. 50 Shades of Grey, you could probably carry that in, but I don't know.
It's pretty clear to me. I'm gonna use the lens that I used most of the time growing up with my parents, which is honesty is the best policy. I think I heard that over and over. We probably all have. Keep your nose clean, do no harm, and just have good intentions. I think that's what we try to do at ECC. We recommend to all of our clients, and I think that's just the easiest policy: is come to experience the culture. Um, Come to do no harm and be upfront and declare anything that you might think that might be on the fence, and let them sort that out. But it sounds like trying to sneak something in, or be on the down low just isn't a policy that we would recommend.
No, definitely not. And the point of talking about this is just to bring up things that people might not think are strange in their own cultural context, but that in Cuba would be. So for some people, it's not a big deal to have, say, a drone with them to do some cool photography. In the case of Cuba, though, you can't bring it with. And so the point here is to bring up some things that are unique about Cuba, that you should be aware of, that are maybe not that interesting or unique in your country.
Can I add one other thing there, which is I think that's in my mind one of the beautiful parts about working with our team is the good news is we're really being very clear on how to fill out this form. But if there are questions, the beautiful part for our clientele and our customers is it's easy to ask us these questions and get our feedback, because Colin's got over 20 years of traveling to Cuba. If you're unsure if something falls within that do not bring list, it's easy just to ask that question and sort it out before the day of the travel.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So now, as you go down the form, you'll find that there's a question about a list of equipment and items, household appliances, and others that you bring, which are not classified as miscellaneous. So, what this is basically a bunch of items that would be of interest to Cuba. So, either because they're taxable, or because they are used in like news reporting. So this is all a bunch of stuff that you probably shouldn't be bringing or wouldn't be bringing unless you are bringing it to donate, or as a part of your journalistic activities. So you'll see in this drop down menu, they particularly want you to call out if you have any auto parts, computer equipment, home appliances, musical instruments, things like that. And then photographic and cinematographic goods. So these are things that you, as as a traveler and someone who's maybe bringing some gifts for people are probably not going to need to select anything in this category. If you have a special case, then you have a special case, and you may need to call it out in this category. But the vast majority of people who are bringing typical gifts like multivitamins or chocolates or USB cards or some different things like that, there's no need to mark anything in this category. And then when we get down to the very bottom, do you have any technical authorization number? That would be if you have already been approved to bring something in. And do you have something to declare at customs? So if you have not got more than $5,000 or its equivalent in cash, if you do not have anything special in your luggage that caused you to select something in one of these two categories, then you can say, no, I do not have anything to declare at customs, and click next. If you have selected one of these drop downs or have more than $5,000, you will have to select yes, which will probably mean that when you get to Cuba, they are going to ask you about it. And that's the end of the customs information page. Which brings us to the sworn declaration. So this is where they just want to basically get you to sign this as an affidavit or as a statement and make sure that you understand that they're serious. I declare that all the information provided in this form is true and complete. I understand that any omission or inaccuracy violates the provisions of the authorities of the Republic of Cuba. That is just them saying, hey, were you honest? Did you tell the truth? Here's your last chance to go back and fix anything that you screwed up on. And, you know, for most people, this is really just a matter of putting in your personal information and saying that that you have a vaccine or whatever your case is with regards to that, and that you're not coughing. So you would, after you've honestly answered all the questions, you click I agree, and then you enter in the little code that it's going to prompt for you and click next. And that is the end of this form. What will happen after you have done this is it will generate a QR code and a page that you can print. It will also email it to you. And you should print out that page to bring with you to the airport. You'll have to show it when you check in, and you'll have to show it when you land in Cuba. And that is the process for the De Viajeros form. How did that, do you have any questions? Does that all make sense?
Yeah, I think I just want to clarify then. So does that eliminate now? I know back in the day with traveling internationally, you have to kind of scramble on the plane to fill out maybe a declaration or a customs form. Does that eliminate the need for us to do that on the plane? This is kind of preceding that work.
Yeah, this is a direct replacement for that form that you used to fill out. Yep. So now you, with this, your boarding pass and your visa, you have everything that you need to enter Cuba.
Got it. All right. Well, I think my takeaways are it's just once I have my flight information that and my passport's up to date. That's everything I kind of need to fill this out. Knock this out. It looks like once I know how to turn it into English, I can decipher most of the questions. I can always refer back to this video if I don't understand some of the nuance. Fill it out. If I have questions, it sounds like you or someone at ECC is on standby to help kind of help me understand anything that's confusing, and that's super helpful. I appreciate you taking the time to walk through it.
Cool. Well, I hope this was helpful for everybody, and have a great trip.
See you in Cuba.